I'm Dawn, and the company that I have is Earthlings, and it's owned by my husband and myself and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and so I guess we fall under the category of mom and pop. And so I have to say that the companies that I am introducing today have really opened the doors for a mom and pop company like mine. They have the credibility and the name and the manufacturing dollars to support this movement and have opened the doors for me and my family. And I thank them for their efforts. I'd also like to take just a second to thank the people in the beginning a year ago who helped me get started, and that would be Sally Fox and Daniel and Alan at EcoSport, and I'd like to thank them today. So the first speaker that I'm going to introduce is Jill Balakis from Patagonia, and she works on fabric development and environmental studies, and we'll enjoy listening to her.
Hi, I just wanted to first thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak to you today. I appreciate the chance to just give you an idea of what Patagonia is doing in this area and where we're moving forward. As Dawn said, I work in the fabric development area, specifically on environmental issues, trying to just look at our fabrics from a new perspective than we've done before. Today I'm going to give you an idea and an overview of where we are as a company and where we're trying to move to. I also wanted just to thank Will and Sam for putting this together and just really emphasize how important these times of sharing are and will continue to be as we try to move forward as a concerted group to further some of these things in the industry. All these clothing companies have a little bit different twist to them, and we're technically more part of an outdoor industry, and so we're smaller than some of these other companies, and so it's interesting to hear how all these different companies are approaching similar goals but in different manners. So I appreciate the opportunity just to be able to share with everybody here. Today I'm going to let you know what our goal is going forward, what we're doing now, what are our plans, and some of the challenges that we're facing. Patagonia's goal in the fabric area is to reduce our overall negative impact on the environment while maintaining the integrity and quality of our products. Our customers have come to expect a certain level of quality, and we have to have that in these products to ensure their longevity. And we want to make sure that this type of work lasts in our line for a long time. We don't want it to be a niche item. We want it to go in some of our core products and move these types of alternative processes into our main line. This is a significant challenge for us because we have a very broad range of fabrics that we use in our line. They go from coated and laminated synthetic fibers, which doesn't really pertain to cotton, but it's part of our overall picture in our technical outerwear, to natural fibers in our sportswear line, and just about everything else in between, with synthetics and knits and wovens and 2- and 3-layer fabrics. So it presents a pretty significant challenge to put our arms around this as a company and to figure out where we're going forward. This is in conjunction with the limited growth of our line. So we're very much focusing on our existing fabrics, our existing processes, and trying to figure out ways that we can improve them from just from reducing the overall negative impacts. We have to work in pretty segmented areas to evaluate the needs in each of these areas of synthetics or natural fibers or 2-layer fabrics or knits or wovens, and reduce their individual impacts. A while ago we did an independent study to figure out where we were standing on this, and we had a study done of our 4 main fibers, which are polyester, nylon, cotton, and wool, and basically it came back and told us everything we do pollutes, and we need to, but in different areas. And so cotton might be good in one area and polyester is bad in another, and vice versa. And so right now we're finding ourselves at the position of trying to figure out what our impacts are in order to reduce them. So we're in the process of assessing what our resources are and how much of them we use to make our fabrics. And we're doing this through a material survey that we are incorporating our vendors on. And we've asked our vendors, we've started with a small group, and we'll continue to every vendor we use for each fabric we use, and asking them to flowchart their process with the raw materials required in each of those areas. Obviously, it's a very large project given the number of fabrics that we use at any one point in our season. But it's also going to give us our ground zero point of where do we go from here, and it's going to highlight the areas for change. This will also give us a tool to track our progress so that we know where we started, where we're going, and where we continually can make the efforts. One thing that's really important in here is vendor relationships. It's vital to a project like this, and incorporating more of the industry into this thought and into this mindset. A lot of them don't really understand it when we approach it to them, especially typical dye houses that are set with, oh, we meet OSHA, we meet EPA regulations, what are you talking about? What do you mean reduce your impacts? And trying to explain to them it's water usage or energy usage, and it's not just their effluent. We have in this country a lot of work already done on effluent treatment. However, our fabrics also encompass global companies, and it's going to be a challenge working with some of these others as well. Some of the benefits to including the vendors early, they really start to evaluate their own plant and processes a little bit closer, and we've already seen some of that come back where somebody says, wow, I never knew that used so much water. We need to figure out why that does. And they begin to understand this mindset of just looking at resources as a whole and not just pollution as part of an environmental change. And they're also forewarned of projects to come. Patagonia is sort of notorious for asking their vendors to do a lot of things beyond the call of duty, and this just gives them a hint of things that are on the burner to come. Some of the product-specific areas that we've been working in, we've done some organic cotton. We haven't done a lot compared to a lot of the other companies represented here. We definitely support the area, and as I mentioned before, we really want to try to get it into some core products, some of our longer running, some of them that have the longevity in it, that it's not a product that'll be fighting for its life as a product, much less having organic cotton involved in it. So we're working hard to increase our usage, and we're in the process of trying to strategize where that's going and how to just to ensure the longevity is really what we're trying to do. We don't want it to be just in our niche products that may not make it through each line. Some of the logistics can be one of the challenges that we're facing right now with this area. We don't do a lot of cotton domestically, and right now it's easier to get it into the products domestically. So it puts us in a couple of different areas. First, it either presents the need to develop some of the fabrics we're using with a new mill that's already incorporated in organic cotton, or convince the present mill to start working in organic cotton. And each of them has their advantages and disadvantages. And we're trying to approach them from both angles right now. We don't have the answer on how to solve this in our line right now, but we're definitely working and strategizing to try to figure out how to increase our usage in it that will last for seasons to come and not, like I said, just being a niche product. Some of the other things that we're working on include dye methods. Color is very important in our line. That's what most people associate with Patagonia, are our bright, clear colors. And it's extremely important to incorporate that into these areas as well. And so the dye methods aren't going to go away from our perspective. We need color in our line. Right now we're using dye methods that aren't very efficient in some of our largest programs, and we're working to make them more efficient, to maybe develop a different dye type and a different finish that'll give us the same effect, but will reduce an overall impact of a non-efficient dye. And we're always evaluating new alternative ones. There's a lot of people working on some really great new things, and we're definitely trying to look to see where they'll fit in our line. And also I was going to touch a little bit on the synthetic work that we're doing because it is such a major portion of our line. Our main fiber that we use, our biggest fiber that we use is polyester, given our technical line in our company. And one thing that we're trying to do in the synthetic area is to incorporate more recycled raw materials. And Brent touched on some of the recycled cotton coming from the industry, but we're also using recycled polyester that they're taking from soda pop bottles, all the 7-Up and Coca-Cola bottles, and spinning it into fiber, and we're using that in some of our fleece products now. So that's part of the whole package, the whole area that we're working on going forward. I think one of the biggest challenges that we face as a company, and I would assume as an industry, is really educating the consumers to some of this work that's being done. A lot of the work that I'm working on now isn't going to show in an end product. If we change a dye type or a dye method and it benefits it, the consumer's never going to know that. And it's a matter of educating them to understand what it is, the work that we're trying to do, and why we think it's important and why we really believe in it. And change and trying to try all these alternatives usually cost more, and we need to let them know why this is so important and why we need to support it going forward. And also working with vendors. Like I said, we're working in our existing fabrics, and so these are vendors that we have very long relationships with, and they come to me and say, we've done it this way for 5 years, 10 years, why change now? And trying to really convince them of the importance of looking at their processes a little bit closer and trying to just evaluate them and want to do that for their own personal benefit as well. That's basically where we're at and where we're going, in trying to really put our arms around this and figure out what the best way is for us to be moving forward in each of these areas. We're kind of working at a slow, steady pace right now, which is more typical of our company. And it's basically just to ensure the longevity, that once we incorporate these processes and develop new things, they're going to be in our line for a while and won't leave the next season. And that's all I have to say today.
Thank you, Jill. And I, too, agree with you. We don't want this to be a fashion trend that goes away. We want it to stay forever. The next speaker I'm going to introduce is Linda Gross, and she's with the company Esprit. She is the design director for the Eco Collection, and she's been working with Esprit for 6 years and has been in the industry working for 12 years. And it's a pleasure to have you speak here today, Linda.
Let's sit up here. I'm just going to shuffle papers for a while because I get nervous and I know things are going to fall on the floor. It's Murphy's Law. Things like that happen. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Yeah. Raise it a little bit. Okay, rude noise. Is that better? Okay, I'm obviously going to talk from a design perspective because my background and training is design. So it may be good or bad for some of you in the audience, but I don't have any numbers to give you. But we do have business people from Esprit here, if anybody is interested in that kind of thing. I've been with Esprit E-Collection since its inception, and I think what is quite interesting is the development that we've gone through at Esprit in developing E-Collection and how that's evolved. Because Esprit E-Collection, it didn't come out of nowhere, and it wasn't a quantum leap into the area of green marketing. We didn't jump on this as a bandwagon to make a fast buck. It was really a representative project that came out of an evolving awareness in the company, something that the company went through, something that I've personally been going through and continue to go through with the other team members on Esprit E-Collection on a day-to-day basis. And I think some of the changes and the shifts in awareness that we're going through, everybody is experiencing today, including the customer and, in fact, society. And we've all got some challenges to go through, and we're in the midst of those right now. So I just wanted to let you know those kinds of challenges that we're going through, and some ways, some scenarios for change that we've picked up on to try and get through those challenges, although we don't have all the answers. So I do have slides, and hopefully the slide projector will work, and hopefully someone knows where the light switch is. Do you? Esprit e-collection, it's an R&D area, a research and development area within the company. And we're aiming to do two things through Esprit e-collection. One is to test out new alternatives to garment manufacture, all the way from raw fiber through to ultimate disposal of the garments. And through Esprit e-collection, we test these things out, and I need a little more light so that I can read my notes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyway, so we do two things. One is we research and develop things through e-collection. We test things out and we make a lot of mistakes, and we do that without risking our regular business. And the intention is to apply some of the discoveries that we make to our mainline production as they become commercially viable and available. And then what we also do is use e-collection as a communication vehicle to the customer so that they can be aware, and the industry for that matter, actually, so that they can be aware of what some of the alternatives are and make educated purchasing decisions and not just buy on a whim or because eco is trendy, which is what often happens with the fashion industry. So what I'd like to do with the slides is go through three things, tell you a little bit about Esprit and how things evolved, and then a little bit about e-collection and then some of the market response. And as I say, my intention is not to boast about the company. I'm very proud of what we're doing, but that's not the intention to give you a big sales pitch. It's just to really share with you what some of the evolvement has been in struggling with some of the issues that I think we're all dealing with. So Esprit is a $1 billion company, and it has distribution in 36 different countries internationally. And for years we've talked to our customers about style and fashion and the difference between the two, and how style is not a fad, that it's an expression of your own values. Our mission statement at Esprit is be informed, be involved and make a difference, which is a value-driven mission statement and sends a strong message to all our employees. And it's a lifestyle company too, and that lifestyle includes an unusually pleasant working environment, and we also have a cafe that's subsidized to employees and serves organic food. Employees are generally encouraged by the company to be involved in community activities, such as the San Francisco AIDS Walk, which is a yearly event, and also renovating schools and the likes. There's lots of programs that go on of this nature, and this is something that happens on what we call Esprit Labor Day. Can you hear me as I'm moving back and forward? Okay. Now, the same values that we have and incorporate through the employees in the company have often been expressed through advertisements and catalogues to our customers as well. And you might remember from the 1980s our Real People campaign, where we used real people instead of models. And at the time it really spearheaded a new approach to advertising, where we weren't using perfect people, we were using real people. Early in 1989 we shifted our mail order catalogues to recycled paper. And that was the first time that a major company made that decision, and it was at a time when recycled stock was quite expensive and not readily available. And then in 1990, in our catalogues, we printed thought-provoking questions next to our image shots. Here's one that says conservation or consumption. So we were just starting to ask our customer to question some of the things that they do and not just buy clothing. So this is just one example. We had other things like vacation or adventure, or paper or plastic. We didn't necessarily offer any solutions or preach in any way. We're just being provocative. In June of 1990, we had an ad in the Utne Reader, which, for those of you who don't know, is a US magazine which represents the best of the alternative press. And it was an ad that was a plea for responsible consumption, where we asked customers only to buy what they need. And coming from a major corporation, it really spearheaded a new level of business consciousness at that time. And as you can imagine, was pretty radical. Now, these types of moves by the company, actually, I have to say, have been constantly criticized or gasped at, actually, by status quo business people who are usually involved in a marketplace that follows consumer attitudes. And time after time, in retrospect, when we look back at these things, they've always really been recognized, when you look back at them, as being on the cutting edge at the time and being in sync with consumer attitudes. And something, this was quite radical within the company as well as outside the company. But our What Would You Do campaign was very interesting. And for me as a designer at the time, where I was involved and aware of these programs going on, didn't quite understand how it applied to product design or business. It was quite reassuring to see what some of the answers were from a postcard that we sent out to our customers. On this postcard, we said, what would you do to change the world? And the numbers of responses that came back were enormous, for one thing. And they really covered environmental and social issues, just as environmental and social programs are going on within the company. And it really proved to us that the customer, or we, were actually in sync with the values of the customer and the concerns of the customer. So here's a statement about the skew-whiffed priorities of our society from a woman in the USA. And what happened was this became an international advertising campaign. And this German girl is saying that she would do something against the madness of consumerism. So again, it was an affirmation that we're actually in sync with the values out there, and that we weren't just operating in an altruistic vacuum. Well, early in 1991, we set up what we called an eco-desk. And that was an area in the company with a specific goal to support and facilitate employee programs and awareness within the company related to global environmental issues. And many programs were implemented through this area, but the two that really affected me in a big way were the Eco-Audit and the Be Informed Lecture Series. And the Be Informed Lecture Series was a program where major environmentalists came into Esprit and talked to us about global environmental concerns and issues. And it was a big eye-opener. I mean, we had major people coming in, from Ralph Nader, a consumer activist, to Anita Roddick of The Body Shop, to Dave Foreman, who founded Earth First, and really an eco-terrorist, if you want to coin a phrase. I mean, some really major people came in once a month, and there was a constant flow of incoming information. And then we had the Eco-Audit, where representatives of areas within the company came together with ideas for programs within the company to implement some ideas of just handling our business more responsibly. And it included things like recycling at every desk and energy-efficient lighting and composting our waste from the cafe and these types of things. Things that have become quite normal now as part of a corporation. But I guess what my point is that with the combination of very high caliber information coming in about environmental issues and then pragmatic programs or mechanisms to apply change through the organization was a very powerful combination. And I think it's interesting today that here we are collectively and we're going through the same kind of a process where you have a variety of speakers with ideas for change or ideas of how they've gone through change. And then we're bringing our two industries together collectively to try and implement those ideas and try to communicate to farmers and the industry as to how to deal with these issues. So it's a very strong combination is what I'm saying, and I'm actually very encouraged that it continues to snowball. So through those programs, what happened was a small group of employees came together with the idea for e-collection. We really took all the values and the programs that were going on within the company and took the next step to apply it to the product itself. And that's how Esprit e-collection came to be. So I'll now go through some brief applications of what the e-collection philosophy is on a day-to-day basis. And then I'll go into some market awareness things. The market response. Well, just as we had sort of broken a few rules as far as advertising goes and image and corporate America, you can also expect it of Esprit that we would not take the normal fashion industry approach to eco and or ecology. And here's Dave Foreman, founder of Earth First. I'm pretty sure that many of you will be familiar with him, but as a defender of wilderness areas and really pretty radical environmentalist. And he's used here in a fashion industry magazine called Textile View. Textile View is an international textile magazine. It reports on the upcoming trends and on fabric fairs, and everybody who is involved in the manufacturing side of the industry is pretty much aware of this magazine or magazines like this. They report on the major fairs that happen in Paris where you go and buy fabrics and so on and so forth. And here what they do is they use Dave Foreman's inspiration for a fashion theme called ecology. And as you might expect, green is the biggest colour, and brown is also going to be strongly represented. The camouflage print, typical of what Dave Foreman wears, is the hot new print. And you're going to see combat jackets and tweed jackets and this kind of a look that represents the ecology look. Well, as you can tell, it doesn't really give us any guidelines as to how to deal with some of the fundamental issues that come up on a day-to-day basis when you're really approaching this whole subject with any amount of integrity or seriousness. And so what we did was we set up our own objectives, and the first one of them being maximize product life. This is probably the most important thing, is to slow down consumerism and maximize product life so that the garment stays with someone longer and that you don't have this fast turnover of fashion. And so the way that we do this is, first of all, we pick up on the company philosophy of style versus fashion. And the garments are certainly not granola or what we would normally expect from an eco line. They have quite a bit of attitude. And they're quite stylish, but they're not fast fashion either. It's something that you could wear for, season after season. This sweater, for example, is one of our best-selling items internationally. And it's something that you would wear season after season. And what we also do is put special details on the items. These are hand-painted buttons by a cooperative in North Carolina. And there's something special that you want to keep for a while because you know that these buttons were done by a cooperative. They're signed by the ladies on the back. It's something special, something different. What we also do with e-collection is we only have 2 seasons a year. We don't have the normal 4, or believe it or not, a fashion company may squeeze 6 seasons out of a year at retail. I know as farmers that's quite unusual, but believe it or not, at retail you can have 6 seasons a year. So we have 2 seasons a year, and part of that is because we have to go through, part of the reason for that is that we have to go through research and development. It takes a long time to do that. But the other reason is, who needs 6 seasons a year, is really what e-collection is trying to get at. And then durability is another aspect. The inside of the garments are really clean finished and durable so that it will last a long time and stay with the owner for longer. And then garments are bar-tacked and buttons are cross-stitched so that the buttons stay on the garments, and it's all to do with durability. Now, one of the things that we did in communicating what our overall philosophy was about was use an agricultural item, which is an apple, to communicate to our customer that even though these garments look the same, that they're different. And we coined a phrase, and that was that the process defines the product. And we said that you might look at this apple and think that it's a natural fruit and it's perfectly healthy and be really thrilled and delighted with what it represents. But if you look back at the process of the way that it was grown, it could have been grown with lots of pesticides and herbicides, and that's got ramifications for farm workers that handle the products. It's got ramifications for the environment, for land and water, and it's got ramifications for people that eat the fruit. And that we can apply that philosophy to absolutely all products, including clothing. And that's how we communicate that to our customer, because they already understand the concept of organic food. So on a day-to-day basis, we set this up. Now I have to say, as a fashion designer, this kind of thinking was not part of my training at all. And I was concerned, and still am, I have to say, with aesthetics and the look of the fabric and the hand feel and cost and quality, of course. But I was never, ever trained to go right the way back to organic cotton, talk with organic cotton farmers or organic chemists for that matter, and really understand all the process. So what we did was we set up this chart, and we use this on a day-to-day basis. And we say that rather than focusing on the product, which essentially would be the apple, that before you can assume that anything, any item, is more environmentally responsible than the next, you have to go right the way back to the source of the raw materials, all the way through the processing, colouring and finishing. Consider the inputs like water and energy, transport, even human health and safety issues and so on, and any of the byproducts that might pollute land or water or air or be harmful to humans. And we also need to consider what happens after the product is made and shipped. What's the packaging, what's the care, and is it recyclable or biodegradable? And the red areas indicate areas that we still have to work on. It's quite an enormously complex thing to get your teeth into. But in the area of organic cotton, of course, is the cotton grown with pesticides and herbicides? Is it certified organic? The next question might be what's the defoliation method that's used? Can we minimize any of those chemical inputs during the processing? What kind of dyes do we use? And so on. So we use this as a guideline for ourselves and also to screen suppliers that might be coming to us with green fabrics. We can use this to ask them the right questions. So one of the areas that we go into is, of course, dyes. We share the same sentiments as Patagonia, and I think from a fashion standpoint, unbleached undyed can replace white, but it can't replace colour. So we really have to deal with the issues of colour. And I think also by choosing to work with colour, we find out what the issues are with dyes and we don't avoid them. So I think it's very important that we look at dye processes on many levels. So what we do is we work with low impact dyes and natural dyes. And with natural dyes, this shirt at the top is a natural dye print. Our concerns are mainly the use of heavy metals to fix the dye stuff to the cloth. And we make sure that we don't use heavy metals such as chrome and tin and copper. And that means that we have a relatively dull colour palette, but I actually quite like those dull colours. And they actually go with unbleached, undyed. It's a much softer colour palette anyway. And we restrict our colour palette according to what we can achieve with those environmental restrictions in place. And then with the low impact dyes, which you see in the rest of the pile, we're concerned with water and energy consumption and also waste after the dye process is finished. Because with synthetic dyes, of course, they're not natural ingredients, there are some ramifications for pollution, and we want to minimize that. So we use dyes that have a very high fixation to the cloth. So on cotton, just to give you an example, the dye fixation is usually in the 60% range, and we manage to get it up in the 90s and above. So there's that much less dye stuff to be treated and then landfilled at the end of the process. Sometimes we manage to do things without dyes at all, like we use naturally coloured wool from black and white sheep. So black sheep get new recognition now. And then of course we use fox fibre, which is naturally coloured cotton, also without using any dyes. We eliminate or minimise harmful processes on fabric, in particular resins. We don't use any resins for shrink-proofing fabric on e-collection. We pre-shrink the fabric using sanforization or pre-washing the garments, and it's basically a way of compacting fabric so that it can't shrink any further. It bunches the fabric up so that, the fibres, so that there's just no room for it to shrink any further. And we don't bleach. We look at the scouring process and look if we can minimize the number of chemicals that are used there or the quantity of chemicals and so on. We also eliminate harmful processing on hardware, and hardware for garments includes things like metal snaps and zippers, safety pins to attach hang tags to the garments and so on. Normally what happens with metals is that inferior metals are used that would rust, and they're electroplated, and basically these snaps would go into a big drum and they would be dipped into a metal solution with an electric current running through, and this electric current would cause another metal to be coated on top of the inferior metal to stop rusting and corrosion. And what happens after the process is that you're left with a large quantity of solution with heavy metals in it and cyanide to cause this chemical reaction. And this has to be treated and landfilled. And just to give you an idea, for every 3,000 snaps that are made, there's a pound of toxic sludge that's produced. And a typical electroplating plant would produce 3 million snaps a day. So it gives you an idea of how much sludge is associated with that process. And what we do is use metals that are not going to corrode to begin with. We use things like brass, stainless steel, and various alloys, and we're able to achieve quite a wide colour range. We do have to be a little bit careful about the properties of the metals and what we're using them from. But we found a solution and an alternative to electroplating. And we minimise load on landfills by using recycled materials. And here I'm giving you an example of wool, where the top corner garments, for example, are 99% post-consumer recycled wool. And what happens is old garments that you might give to a thrift store that don't even sell in a thrift store are then taken to a recycling area, and they're shredded up and then reprocessed into yarn and rewoven into fabric. And so they enjoy a new life through these garments. And there's about 1.5 garments in each one of those jackets. So we minimise, that would normally be garments that are headed for landfill. And of course we support sustainable agriculture and farming where we can. I don't need to talk that much about organic cotton. My intention is to let you know that organic cotton is a big part of our programme, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But it's part of a whole big comprehensive approach to doing business that we're embarking on. And we also, this is a flax plant, and for spring '94 we've applied this to linen. So we're using organically grown linen as well. With e-collection, we really believe that an environmental line isn't just about changing physical processes. It's also about supporting sustainable lifestyles and endangered cultures. And so we work with non-profit organizations and co-ops, and we initiate trading partnerships with people and maintain those relationships to develop items for e-collection. And these are ladies in North Carolina who do our hand-painted buttons that you saw earlier. And we also sell those buttons on cards, and the ladies sign the back so that the customer knows where the buttons are coming from, and there's an explanation about the cooperative and what we're trying to do there. These are the ladies in West Virginia that hand-knit our sweaters, and we make sure that each season we place one e-collection sweater with them according to the capacity that they can handle. And these women in North Carolina, they had the knitting skills. West Virginia. It's a rural area where jobs for women are very few. And fulfilling e-collection orders was the first time they came together as a group, and now they're forming a formal co-op. Then we also work with an organisation called Conservation International that some people will probably be already very familiar with. This is an area in Ecuador, and the Esmeraldas region is the most diversified rainforest in Latin America, and of course is susceptible to deforestation, as most areas are. What we do is we work with Conservation International, working with the tagua nut. And these nuts at the bottom are sliced and then turned into discs and then become buttons that we use on the line. And the trees basically have to be there to produce the nut. But they also provide an alternative and a viable business for the local people there, an alternative to logging. And working with Conservation International, we make sure that we're not just buying tagua nut buttons, but we're buying into a whole new way of doing business. And they monitor the program, they make sure that forest management's in place and the nuts are harvested in a sustainable fashion. And then finally, we've got many examples of these, but I know that I'm restricted time-wise. So this is the last example where we're working in Ghana with reconstituted glass, and that's old bottles that are ground down to a powder and sifted along with pigments into a mould. And then that mould goes into this kiln, and they're made into buttons. And actually glass beads is a traditional craft in Ghana, so we found a new application for that traditional craft. And we use these on sweaters or shirts, or sometimes we sell them on the button cards as well. Now, communication for us is a very important thing, and we've definitely, as I said, taken the stance that we really need to communicate to the customer so that they can make political purchasing decisions when they buy items. And I think this is very important while we're still operating in a consumer-based economy, because a purchasing decision by a customer can really send a big message to business. Just as we choose to do business with responsible suppliers or proactive suppliers, they can also choose to place their business with proactive companies. So one of the ways that we do, or we have made this communication to the customer, is an employee handbook here, or an employee manual. And we go over all the processes of e-collection and educate our employees about what we're trying to do with e-collection, and includes some of the philosophies as well, and all the processes, so that they can communicate to the customer in the store. And it includes, for example, I slipped this in just to wake some people up, a couple of naked bodies up there. But basically we said one of our philosophies was that natural clothing doesn't mean a return to fig leaves. So we stick that in there so that, we have a bit of fun with this as well. It's very serious and we take the whole movement very seriously, I can tell you, but we try to have fun as well. And in-store displays, we show the process. There's a tag or nut image as much as we show the product. And we have some saliva there from one of our spinning mills of fox fibre, so the customer really understands that the colour is actually in the fibre and it's not applied on the actual garment. Because when you see the final garment, you don't quite understand the concept of colour without dyeing. And then perhaps the best form of communication for us has been our press kits. We've done no advertising whatsoever for e-collection, but our press kits are really quite unusual for the industry. And we talk about all the programs that we're doing, the non-electroplating, the reconstituted glass buttons, whatever it might be. And the response has been really quite phenomenal. Initially, I have to admit, this is a fashion spread, a full-page fashion spread in French L. E-collection is distributed in 13 different countries internationally. And the fashion press didn't really know what to do with us. It was a nice concept, and they liked the idea. But they wanted to know what the new colours were and what the new styles were, and how short the hemlines were and things like this. So it's taken a little bit of getting used to, but I have some examples later on, not too later on, I might add, just a few more minutes, to show you how that press has evolved. So what I just now want to tell you, might sort of say, well, look, she's not talking about organic cotton at all, but I just wanted to give you an idea that it's a really comprehensive approach that we have, and organic cotton is very important part of what we're doing. And I want to show you that e-collection as an R&D project is a progressive project by its very nature. And each season we go deeper and broader in our applications and in our thinking, and for that matter in our understanding. And organic cotton and organic fibres is probably the best example of this. Spring '92 was the first season that we did for e-collection. And you can see here we have quite a nice range of fabrics. We have some fox fibre in the stripe there, and we have some organic cotton knits, and it's green and ecru, and then unbleached, undyed linen and cotton. And our organic items were t-shirts, basically, came in, or knits I should say, and they came in two colours, unbleached, undyed, and in a green colour. And we also had some socks. And the image was, quite nice and fresh and starting to break through the granola image that you normally associate with environmental lines. 3 seasons later, by fall '93, which is about to be delivered into the stores now, we have a much richer palette here. We're working with natural dyes on wool up there. We have Tencel, which some of you may be aware of, and if you're not, I'm not going to tell you about it because I don't have time. And then we have unbleached, undyed wools. And we have, in the organic area, we've got organic wovens as well as knits, much more of a variety of textures and a little bit more style, quite a few more colours. And I think what's important here is, particularly in the wovens, we're using transitional organic cotton. And that really came from what our understanding was about your industry, about the agricultural industry, and how difficult it was to transition from organic into from conventional into organic cotton. So we decided to really support that effort, and we communicate to our customers through our brochures and through our press kits what transitional cotton is and why it's important to support that kind of a movement and not just get behind a hot item because it's trendy, like we've got this hot organic cotton t-shirt. We're really want to communicate that this is a whole movement. And our image for fall '93 is quite sophisticated and really quite fashionable, or stylish, I should say. For spring '94, we're going even further. Of course, there's a variety of textures and prints there. With organic cotton, we have low-impact dye on Acala cotton from California, here in the little knit T-shirt. We have Pima cotton that's yarn dye stripe there. At the top, we have organic cotton that's space dyed using a natural dye. And in the middle, we have a marled effect that's also a natural dye wrap on the yarn that's also organic cotton. At this point, everything that we do on e-collections is anything that's cotton is organic or transitionally organic. But it's all certified, it's always through a certified program. And we have wovens, we have knits, and also for this season, we blended it with Tencel. Tencel is a new fibre on the market that's probably the most cutting edge item that's an alternative to rayon. And so anything that we do that's cotton, including blends, is organic or transitional. Oh, that's right. And then, of course, I'm very proud of this, we've got organic linen. So we're moving into the concept of organic into other fibres as well. So we're getting broader in our applications. And we have 2 sweaters there and the vest in the front. And the other items are organic cotton. We needed those to sort of lift the slide so it wasn't just all beige. So, all right. I'm trying to speed up, I'm sorry. But that's the image shot from spring '94. And I think this is really important. I think you guys need to hear this. Because it's not all hunky-dory, basically. One of the many challenges in making e-collection for us, actually, is making it into a viable business. And it's extremely difficult, given the economic system that we're working with. And just as farmers in the room have to work with farm subsidies and loan systems that favour conventional farming, so we have to work with a pricing structure that doesn't reflect environmental costs in the final cost of the garments. So basically, in the marketplace, we're competing with conventionally produced items that are subsidized by the environment. And it's a really tricky area for us. But anyway, this is the approach that we have from a business standpoint. And e-collection represents the idealism in the company. And 25% is always cutting edge, so that would be the natural dyes and the organic linen, for example. And 75% of it is what has become e-collection history. So 2.5 years ago, Fox fibre was really cutting edge for us, and we worked with John Price at Texas Tech to spin it because no mills were interested in spinning Fox fibre. And now Fox fibre is really being spun by a lot of mills that are represented here now. It's become part of e-collection history. The same has happened with organic cotton. The same has happened with low-impact dyes, and so on. So there's this downward movement then where we transfer the commercially available and viable things that we've discovered through e-collection into a concept that we call Esprit Blue Planet. And Esprit Blue Planet is part of our mainline distribution and business. It gets an Esprit label, but it has a hang tag that explains the Blue Planet concept and explains that we've taken applications from e-collection and mainstreamed it into our main lines. And this is something that's coming out of Europe right now. And that's been our most successful area with e-collection. There seems to be a lot of awareness there, and things have been going well. So this represents really the realism in the company. The price points are about 10 to 15% higher than the regular lines, whereas e-collection can be quite a lot higher, and particularly the cutting edge styles can be really pricey because we're always aiming to be on the forefront now. And I have to say there's some, let me have a think what the word is. Not confusions, but conflicting interests here. For example, to make organic cotton work in Blue Planet, we have to take USA produced organic cotton and manufacture it offshore because of CMT prices in order to make it work at a 10 to 15% higher than our regular line. We don't do that with e-collection, but we do that with Blue Planet. And that's an absurd use of natural resources. But again, we're working in an economic system that doesn't fit with what our idealism is or what we're aiming, where we're going, basically. So that's one of the challenges that we face, and We don't have answers to those kinds of issues right now, but we're grappling with them. The chart that I showed you earlier of the self-auditing process, because we're doing Blue Planet now, has become more sophisticated. What we've done is set up a chart for our designers to use as a tool, listing out all the questions that you would ask about product development, from raw fiber right the way through to packaging. All the questions that might come up about ginning or about spinning or about weaving or about a shoulder pad or a button, following the life cycle of each one of those items. It's enormously complex, and we're right in the middle of it now. And we're trying to work on an internal evaluation system where we can give our design teams and other teams within the company that are applying these ideas through our main lines, trying to give them guidelines as to what answers and what are the appropriate measures to take when we're trying to make a difference through product development. So what I'm trying to get at here is that our whole approach, from the business standpoint, from implementing it through the organization and so on, is getting more substantial. It's not hype. We're integrating it. It's becoming part of business as normal. And these are some of the items from our Esprit Blue Planet line. It's more sporty than e-collection, but they have organic cotton items through our mainline distribution already. So we've come quite a long way really since spring '92. And of course, these are communication vehicles for Blue Planet to the customer. We let them know what it's all about. So basically, I'm drawing up to a conclusion here. But this is the earlier image that I showed you from Textile View magazine. This is the eco theme from a fashion standpoint. 3 years later, the same magazine, Textile View magazine, is doing a 6-page, in-depth article, editorial about what e-collection's doing. And this is a major industry magazine that everyone in the industry reads, especially in Europe. So I think you can see there that the press as well and the communication vehicle, that people are realizing that it's not just hype, it's not just a passing trend, and they're really interested in what some of the struggles are and what we're trying to do. And substantial press that we've been getting is just continues. There's no slowing down. It includes the London Financial Times, it includes the New York Times, it includes CNN, ABC, the BBC, you name it. People out there are very interested and in sync with what we're trying to do. So in closing, what I just wanted to do was read to you again, by way of showing you that we're not in an altruistic vacuum here, that the consumer is right there with us and going through the same kinds of questioning that all of us are going through. And I've got a few examples that might show you what the future of organic cotton might be, and it's from a Swiss consumer interest group. And we were giving these questions, and we have to deal with these questions on a day-to-day basis. It's really frightening. But anyway, here are some of the questions that they had about organically grown cotton. Do you use genetically engineered cotton? Number one. Is the cotton hand-picked or gathered with machines? Do you use defoliation methods, and if so, which ones? Are the cotton plants artificially irrigated, and if so, why? Do you consider all aspects of cotton growing, including responsible salary for farm workers? So there are some new issues that are coming up from the consumers, and they're questions that we've asked ourselves too and are actually starting to ask the farmers. But the point is that the consumers' concerns are getting deeper and broader, just as our awareness is also getting deeper and broader. So I think growing cotton organically, it's like establishing a serious eco-audit, and it's the least that we can do, and it's the first step towards a whole new way of doing business as normal. It's not a movement based on making a fast buck, and it's not a movement based on altruism either. It's really part of a whole shift in awareness and a shift in lifestyles to accommodate that awareness. So I'd encourage everyone to be part of this movement and caution you to take it seriously and be prepared to take deeper and deeper steps. I think if you're jumping on the bandwagon, don't bother, because the eco trend happened three years ago and it's over. You've already missed it. This might be a little altruistic, but I'm going to have a go at this. I was thinking last night with a friend about today's presentation, and we came up with an idea of what's going on right now. And if you think about over 200 years ago, that small group of people in Boston who started to complain about a tax system without representation, who could have possibly imagined that eventually that would lead to an American Revolution or to the, the strongest world nation of the last 200 years? And I just feel like today, and being involved in this movement, that we're starting something and we don't even know what we're starting in a way. I don't think anyone has a grasp on where the end result is. And I think sustainability is a moving target as our awareness increases and our understanding of what that word means increases. And I think we're in for quite a few challenges, but I also think it's an historic and very exciting time to be involved in these issues. And I would just wish everybody the best of luck in whatever form their approach takes.
Thank you, Linda. That was really wonderful. I think you really showed us how connected this whole thing is and how deep and how far we have to go. It's just really the beginning. Absolutely. The next guest speaker I'd like to introduce is John Dwayne, and he is representing the company The Gap. I think we all know The Gap. He is the Senior Director and Production Sourcing for The Gap.
We probably all sound a little bit nervous up here. It's not just because of the large group of people, but this podium shakes. Forgive me. I'm just going to read a brief statement about the Gap's approach to this whole issue, and then I'll talk for just a couple of minutes about myself as an individual in the company. The Gap Incorporated believes that actively promoting a healthy global environment is both a corporate and individual responsibility. It's also simply good business. We're committed to operating with respect and sensitivity to the environment, locally and on a global scale, but with particular attention to areas in which we conduct business. In accordance to and with our corporate environmental policy, we have developed guidelines that are specifically directed towards global sourcing and manufacturing. The company will seek, favor, and encourage our business partners who are proactive in the support of our philosophy to protect the environment. We are committed to supporting our business partners who progressively upgrade their facilities to comply with our global environmental policies. This is really important because as a member of a large corporation, we're finding that we're in a business that's developed, and we're part of the mess, so to speak, at this point, and we need to know how to make it better. And we actively support our business partners that are in that same quagmire that are working to improve their systems. We don't want to just jump ship and go somewhere else. The company requires all of our suppliers to comply with or exceed all local, state, and federal environmental laws. And we're in the process right now of doing an environmental audit, a complete audit of our corporation and what we do as manufacturers. And once we understand exactly where we are, we're going to use additional environmental guidelines, shall we say, to help bring our current suppliers up another notch. The company will strive to support sustainable agriculture and reduce our dependency on non-renewable natural resources. This is real important too. We've been dabbling for the last couple of years in sustainable agriculture in one way or another. In Banana Republic, for example, which is part of the Gap, there are garments in the store right now that are made from organically grown cotton. We don't have them labeled as such. It's a testing procedure that we're going through. Our concept going into this is that we want to supply the consumer, our customer, with the product that they're used to buying from us. We want organic cotton and sustainable agriculture to be part of the way we do business. not, as Linda and Jill have talked about, a fashion fad or something that, we hang a label on to make a fast buck. We're going to seek to reduce the use of hazardous materials, and we'll seek through technology safer substitutes wherever feasible to protect employees, business partners, and the communities in which we conduct business. This is real important too. Last year about this time, Will Allen took a bunch of us out around to the cotton farms and the communities here in the Central Valley, and gave us a real quick education, but real interesting, about how cotton is produced conventionally and what the problems are with that, and what we can do with organic cotton. So it was very enlightening, and the company has since really jumped in and tried to work with this as much as possible in all kinds of different ways to promote organic cotton, whether it's blending it with conventional cottons or using it on its own, or as Linda talked about a little bit, using the transitional cottons. We're going to continually conduct environmental audits of our manufacturing facilities. We use the results to help prioritize our own environmental efforts. The ongoing assessment and revision of our guidelines will help us continually improve our role as an environmentally responsible manufacturer. And Linda talked a little bit about this as well. This whole environmentally friendly manufacturing business is a real moving target. It just keeps going to the next level, and we have to keep pushing to do more and do better all the time. So we don't want to establish certain things in black and white and say this is the goal we want to achieve and we made it and here we are. It's going to just keep evolving and keep evolving as we go. We're also committed to educating our employees, our business partners, and stockholders and customers in environmental awareness in order to create an understanding of the environmental impact of their actions. And Linda talked about this actually quite a bit in great detail. It's very, very important. That's our environmental policy, and I wanted to talk just a couple of minutes about me as an individual. 2 years ago, the GAP put together a committee called the GEO Committee, and it's becoming a large group, but it started as a small group of employees that were concerned about what we were doing as manufacturers. I think that probably everybody in this room and everybody in my company, when you ask them if they're an environmentalist, they say, well, yeah, I'm an environmentalist. I care about the environment. And I thought I was too. And then I started to find out about exactly what happens in the garment manufacturing process and how devastating it is to the environment. And it was a real wake-up call. So I thought, as a member of a GAP, which is a very large corporation, in certain terms, small in others, I guess, there's something that we can do about that. And there were other people in the company that felt that way as well. So Bob Fisher, our COO at the time, organized these people with the mandate to just work in the areas that you work in the company and make it better in every way that you can. So it covers the whole spectrum from recycling the paper and minimizing the paper usage that we have at headquarters and in our warehouse and in our stores to more environmentally friendly manufacturing processes, which are not just using agriculture, cotton, linen, whatever it happens to be, but as the previous speakers have talked about as well, using different dye stuffs, low-impact dyes or natural dyes. You'll see in the fashion show a little after lunch that some good examples of garments that we've used low-impact dyes on, as well as garments dyed right here from companies like Allegro with 100% natural dyes. The idea is to try and take all kinds of different approaches to this very, very complicated manufacturing process and make it as environmentally friendly as possible without compromising quality in any way to our customers. Another good example of that is Conservation International, as Linda brought up. The GAP is 1% of the retail industry in this country, and it's a huge company, but yet we're only 1% of the business. Taking that 1%, we can make a difference in some of the things that we do. We're the largest buyer of Togwa nut buttons, I think, in the world. And all the buttons that we buy, all the Togwa nut buttons that we buy are bought through Conservation International. So I think just by doing very, very simple things like that, we can make an impact. And it's pretty exciting. Anyway, the GEO Committee is working in all kinds of different ways to try and restructure and rethink the way that we're doing our businesses, the way that we're practicing our business, to make it as best as possible. And we've got I think, some very positive results so far, and more to come in the future. So you'll see some tangible examples of what I'm talking about in the show after lunch, but that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, our last guest speaker on this panel is Christine Nielsen, and she's the founder and president of Koyuchi, and she has some beautiful fabrics that she creates, and I've had the pleasure of using some of them myself.
Thank you, Dawn. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today to tell you a little bit about our company, Koyuchi Incorporated. We are not clothing manufacturers. We are located in Point Reyes Station, California, a small community about an hour north of San Francisco. We design and produce woven fabric from organically white and green and brown fox fiber cotton. Duran Textiles, represented at this event by Tommy Kendrick and Bill Buchanan, spins our yarn and weaves our fabrics. We're a very small company. Karen Urbanic, our designer, and Suzanne DeConey, who manages our office, are both here today too. The topic of this panel is specific scenarios for change. Since our history is short, we incorporated in December of 1991, and since our purpose since the inception of our business has been to work with and promote organic cotton, it seems more reasonable to talk to you about how and why we began and share some of the changes that have occurred during our 21 months of existence. In other words, I'm going to tell you a story. Koyuchi, which is Spanish for brown cotton, began as a result of my friendship with Sally Fox. Prior to starting Koyuchi, I was a weaver, involved in community development projects in Oaxaca, Mexico, related to textiles and indigenous women. Sally and I had met through my interest in her work and my hope that we might collaborate together with a traditional colored cotton growing community in southern Mexico. Sally acquired seeds from me through the USDA Seed Bank, which we planted in Oaxaca, and she came to visit me there in April of 1991. During that time, we went to an Amuscos village, Xochislahuaca, where the women have a long tradition of growing, spinning by hand, and weaving on backstrap looms with Koyuchi. After that trip, I wrote a grant with the intention of raising money to teach the village people organic growing methods and help them market their textiles. In October of 1991, I went to Wasco, California to talk to Sally about this proposal and to learn more about her selection process. After a long, hot day in the fields, we came back to her house. She'd been out since 9 o'clock and had 18 messages on her machine. She offered me a cup of tea and a radio so I could listen to NPR while she dealt with her calls. I declined, as the whole phenomenon of her expanding business was fascinating to me. Of her 18 messages, 5 were from people interested in information about her line. I asked her what she did with those calls. "Erase them," she said. "I don't have a line." The next day, driving home, my head began to spin with what I felt was a great and exciting possibility, a business that would create woven textiles from organic fox fiber cotton. That night, I called my friend Suzanne and told her my idea. "Wonderful," she said. "Let's talk about it tomorrow." She meanwhile spoke to a mutual friend, and within a week we had $20,000, a lawyer, an accountant, and the beginnings of the incorporation process. I contacted Karen, who had training in textile design and natural dyeing, and proposed the venture to her. She was likewise intrigued and agreed to join us as our designer. So within a month of my visit to Sally, we had the humble start of Koyuchi. We were able to acquire 10 bales of organic acela from Boswell, and Sally graciously sold us some brown and green cotton from her breeding nursery. We did our first yarn development work with John Price at Texas Tech, and Karen valiantly wove our first samples on her high-tech AVL Dobie 18 harness computerized loom. We chose from the many samples she had made an assortment of twill and plain weaves that we thought showed a range of pattern, texture, and weight and began to send swatch sets to the many businesses that had contacted us during the early months. There was no question, even at this early stage, that there was great interest in organic and natural colored cotton woven textiles. Growing awareness of the harmful effects of pesticides, herbicides, defoliants, and chemical fertilizers had made manufacturers and retailers more eager to offer their customers organic alternatives in clothing. There was as well increasing interest from the interiors market in textiles that were organic and untreated. However, we struggled with many limitations. Lack of capital, the high cost of using these fibers, changes at Texas Tech, and too few of us. We were fortunate in October of last year to find Duran. Karen had gone on a mill search through the eastern seaboard states, looking for a facility that both spun and wove and that could begin to work with us immediately. She met with an extremely warm welcome at Duran and began a relationship with them that has been of great benefit to us. They supported, encouraged, and advised us through the succeeding months, accommodating our incessant research and development needs and working with us in solving the problems we encountered at industry-level production. The principal and overriding concerns we heard from clothing manufacturers during our first year was for less expensive and lighter weight fabrics. Finally, in March, Karen was able to go to Duran and work in their sample unit. She brought back an impressive array of fabrics that represented both more variations in weights and lower production costs. She also began experimenting with different fiber combinations. Armed with this beautiful array of possibilities, I went to New York in April, where I met with fabric buyers from Japan, Hong Kong, France, and the United States. The response from everyone was positive. All wanted sample yardage as soon as possible. I was also fortunate to have introductions to two of the largest contract interiors businesses in New York, Maharam and the Knoll Group. They were also very enthusiastic. So at the moment, our future looks very bright. A designer with whom we have been working in Hong Kong has presented prototype garments made from our lightweight fabrics to a number of retailers in this country and Europe. We have signed a contract with one of the best interior showrooms in Los Angeles and have had inquiries from designers and architectural offices around the country. Clothing designers in Japan and Belgium have just received sample yardage and are optimistic about possibilities in their countries. And a number of large domestic clothing companies are interested in working with our new fabrics. We feel we've made tremendous progress during these past months, both in understanding our role and our potential, and at the same time learning the realities of the textile business and more about our clients' needs and requirements. However, we have been challenged over and over by the fact of being pioneers in working with natural colored cotton wovens. From the first step, organic fiber, to the last, finishing, scouring the woven yardage, we have had problems, many of which are not unique to us. At the supply level, organic cotton is not always available when one needs it. And since there is no commodities market for organic cotton, finding what is in the preferred variety and color can be a struggle. Stickiness. This is not the only time you will hear this mentioned at this event. Often hard to detect or measure in the raw fiber has plagued us and Duran. It causes difficulties not only in the carding process, but in spinning and warping, delaying all stages of fabric production up to the time the warp yarns are sized and on the loom. Since the color in natural colored cotton is not developed without alkaline, scouring has its mysteries too. The pH has to be carefully controlled in order to maximize the brilliance of the colors. Since colored cotton makes more elastic yarn than white cotton, the manner of finishing needs to be adjusted in order to give or allow the greatest possible collapse in the fabric so as to pass along minimal shrinkage to customers buying finished yardage. Besides these technical considerations, the range of color that can be achieved with blends of white, brown, and green cotton is limited. This doesn't present a serious problem for us this year because our fabrics are new. But in the future, we know we will be faced with finding organic ways of adding more color to our textiles. For that reason, we have already begun to explore fiber blends with colored wool and the combination of naturally dyed wool, cotton, silk, linen, and hemp with white and natural colored cotton. In conclusion, I would like to return to the beginning. We formed Koyuchi with a deep concern and commitment to the environment. Our interest was in creating a business that would make a product that helped, not harmed, life on our beleaguered planet. We come from backgrounds in community service work and all believe that what we do in business should be socially responsible and affirm our values. We share a love of beautiful textiles and a deep respect for traditional cultures that still make them by hand. We are heartened by the growing awareness, the growing concern of many others, all of us here today, who in some way feel as we do and are involved in similar processes. My hope is that by understanding the difficulties and challenges each of us faces, we can work more closely together and so make a larger and more effective contribution to the betterment of the health of all people and the quality of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. We have about 20 minutes left on this panel before we break for lunch. And this is an opportunity that we have an open mic where you can ask any question to the panel up here.
Good to see you all again. I think the social issues some of you mentioned probably are going to come to the fore. When I was driving down this morning around 5 o'clock, KCBS had an editorial sort of attacking the clothing industry in general, okay, about social aspects of the production of clothes. And they specifically mentioned Esprit and Gap. And they didn't directly attack you, but they said we should ask you questions about how your clothes are made in terms of a sweatshop type of piecework. So I think that kind of issue, obviously, with impeccable timing, right? Here you got this incredible work that you're all doing, and then another issue comes up from KCBS. So I just would like to get some response from you on that issue. Thanks.
I would say quite honestly, it's like I said in the presentation, it's we're all going through a new level of awareness, and producing things offshore and getting cheap labour continues to go on. I mean, there are trade issues that are being discussed at political levels right now, and these things are not going to go away. And all I can say is that my company has been going through some thinking, and specifically through e-collection, we have charters in place that specifically request that our manufacturers do not subcontract out without us knowing about it, and if they do subcontract out, that we will withdraw from them, withdraw our production from them. And that's specifically for e-collection. Now, e-collection is a relatively small project, and it's relatively easy to control. Relatively easy. Even that isn't easy. Everyone's out to make a fast buck, and they wouldn't necessarily tell you what they're doing. And as the larger company, all I can say is that it has been business as normal for the past however many years since this industry has existed. And if we're going through a new level of awareness and shifting, it's a difficult shift to make. If you're a $1 billion company, you can't change overnight. So I'm not making any excuses. I'm just acknowledging that there are some issues and some problems and some real challenges if we're trying to make this shift. I don't personally have control over what the larger company does. I can only say that e-collection in its own way is trying to experiment and try out new ways of going about the business. And that's one of the areas that we're working on as well as the other areas.
I think Linda said it all. No, I'd just like to say a couple of things. Offshore production is not synonymous with sweatshops. I think one of the nice things that we have up here on this panel with people like Patagonia and Esprit and Gap and Banana Republic is companies that work on a higher level, companies that aren't in the sweatshops and that aren't paying below minimum wage in these countries for production. We're very picky about the types of facilities that we use in manufacturing. We have been in the past and we continue to be that way in the future. I think it's also safe to say we have a heightened awareness on this issue, and we're putting a lot more attention to the matter. When I started looking at sourcing manufacturing for the Gap and Banana Republic, we did about half of the production that we do now in the United States. In other words, we doubled our production here in the U.S. And that didn't come from a wage rate issue. It came more from an environmentally healthy way of doing business and just the right thing to do with bringing manufacturing jobs back here. So I know my company, and I feel safe speaking for the other two, feel the same way, but very strongly about that. Focus as much manufacturing here in the U.S. as possible for wages and environmental reasons as well.
That's great. That's a real concern of ours, is that we support products that are made in the USA, especially grown and made USA. That's one way of dealing with the offshore problem, and particularly right now with this New Deal that's trying to go through. We really are the ones who have to take the responsibility as manufacturers, because we make those decisions.
I've just got a question regarding the packaging materials that are used for the production of the clothing industry, and I know that most of that stuff just goes to landfill. And if you guys have any ideas or any comments on that.
I can touch on that. I don't know how you turn it on. Is it on? Okay, can you hear me? That's something that we're struggling with a lot right now. And just the logistics of handling clothing from where it's cut and sewn to where you get it. So many hands handle it. You need to have types of packaging to deal with that. And we can't get away from that. There's no getting around that. Some of the issues we've tried to do is instigate recyclable bags and try to get our dealers to send those back and so that they can be recycled. Trying to use recycled cardboard in our warehouses, trying to minimize our impacts in that area. Though right now we're struggling with one in our technical underwear line because it's in a plastic package. It's a lightweight piece of goods. It's usually white, and nobody wants a dirty piece of technical underwear coming to their door. And so we're trying to address those. We don't have all the answers. We're trying to make little steps as we can, but we don't have all the answers right now. But it's definitely something we're trying to address and move towards. But it's a difficult one.
Yeah, one of the things that we have in our company is taking it off hangers and putting it in boxes. A lot of manufacturers have to ship very quickly, and so they just pull it off the rack, and they put the hanger, goes out in the box, and it's covered in plastic. And we're finding that it's taking us almost twice as long to ship out our orders because we have to, we recycle the hangers back to our contractors, and they come back to us. So forth. So it works okay in a small company, but I can't even imagine what you must go through trying to set these new systems in. Okay.
And I think I can probably say this for Patagonia Spring again, we don't just work on recycling issues, but we work very much on minimizing our packaging, just to stop from the beginning using so much. I know in the Gap, this is one of the big things that we did for our GEO committee, was try and reduce the amount of packing material we use to get our garments to our warehouse and then to our stores. And we were successful in that to the tune of almost 50% of the amount of materials we use. And that's a nice number, 50% of what? Maybe it was horrendous to begin with, so we can sound like stars. But we're pretty happy with what we have right now. A lot of the things that we ship within the United States don't have plastic packing on them. And the packing materials that we use are 100% recyclable. I know Tupperware takes all of our plastics from our distribution center and recycles that into goods that they produce for our consumers. So besides just using recycling, we minimize the amount of things we use in packaging.
I guess I just have a little bit of advice if you're going about your own auditing process with regards to packaging. That if you, what happens with these processes is that there are some things that you can impact immediately. And if you zero in on those, you have a sense of accomplishment that you're getting somewhere. And if you list out deeper and deeper and deeper levels that you need to go to. So one of the areas that you might be able to achieve straight away is with your packing boxes that they're 100% post-consumer recycled, for example. And that any plastic bags are 90% post-consumer recycled plastic. You can't get 100% apparently. Ours are 90%, and the more percentage of post-consumer recycled you have in there, the more difficult it is to see through the bag if you're trying to select items and you need to see a colour or a style number. So those are two areas that you could probably, we'd be happy to pass on suppliers for on plastic bags and that type of thing. And then the other area that you can impact relatively quickly is do you usually ship out one item put in a plastic bag and then put it in a blister pack of 12 and then put it into a big box? And of course you don't need all that if you're thinking. And there might be some extra packaging that you have to go through, like maybe you can pack 12 t-shirts in one bag, and maybe you can pack 6 jackets because they're bigger in one bag. But item by item, you can probably get it down to a certain number of sized bags, to meet your minimums and all that stuff, and increase your costs and so on. So there are some things that you can impact immediately. But when you have a huge company and all your bags are coming from wherever, how many different countries that you're producing, and what's recyclable is high density polyethylene or low density polyethylene. It might be different from country to country, and then you're shipping out to, maybe you don't have as much of a problem with this because you have your own retail stores, but when you're shipping out to stores and Macy's doesn't want to ship their bags back to you and someone else might, but it's enormously complex, and then someone's got to accept the bags, and it's a job in itself. So there's a good business opportunity somewhere, So, you just be honest and just do the best you can in which areas, and then seriously look at the other areas that you can impact.
First, I wanted to thank all of you, large and small companies, for your levels of commitment. It's particularly quite almost overwhelming to hear what e-collection has gone through and continues to go through, and it's really an inspiration. My question to the larger companies is, have you found a way to use the resources of your companies to affect and support regulatory and legislative changes for agriculture and in the textile industry to help protect the environment, to make it harder to do some of the harmful practices or make it easier to be supported in doing some of the appropriate practices?
I can start. Patagonia is interesting because in our marketplace, as I mentioned, which is the outdoor market, we're a big company. In the clothing world, we're a small company. Compared to Linda and John over there, we're like a mosquito on a lot of these vendors. We're not that big to instigate a lot, but the thing that we do, people like to work with us because of the quality and integrity of our products, and so we can push them to try new things, and we can push them to look at different options. But as far as having the power to change, I think it's increasing, but I don't think we've had it to the same degree as maybe some of the larger quantity people. A lot of times I'll start a new project and make 20 phone calls to receive 19 no's and one maybe, and maybe pursue down that path. And so from my perspective, I don't think we have a huge power right now, but I think it's gaining from our perspective.
I think the best use of our time and energy as a large corporation is to change manufacturing policies and procedures. And I find that the smart time and money that my company invests is actually not so much with the Congress of the United States, but with the manufacturing sites where we produce our products, and trying to re-educate these people into a new way, a more friendly way of doing what we do as manufacturers. We also have a foundation in the company, the GAP Foundation, which donates money to different groups like CRRS. I think that's another good, positive way that companies like ours can contribute, and we do contribute in that way. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, we do that.
I sort of share similar sentiments to Jill. What we're doing is quite enormously complex and time-consuming, and unfortunately that 25% of the chocolate triangle is what's the most time-consuming. And being involved in legislation and so on is, again, it's another job in itself. We have been involved with the EEC labelling and met with the French environmental minister, and that was really because e-collection had a lot of credibility, or has a lot of credibility in France, and they came to us and asked what we were doing. I believe Patagonia was also involved in something. I remember your name being on the meetings. And what we found, actually, at that end of legislation, in terms of eco-labeling anyway, was that their interest was to shift at least 60% of the marketplace. And even though you've got some big players up here, the percentage in the marketplace is nowhere close to 60%. And so you find that the level of the criteria that they're working with is nowhere near as high as what the people here are aiming for. So it's all very well to go through the life cycle of a garment and say where you can impact certain things or lessen impact. But for example, the EEC wasn't even considering organic cotton, not even close. I mean, they were even considering polycotton. I mean, we're talking really low down by my standards anyway, or by the collection standards. And the reason was to bring a vast majority of the marketplace along into being, getting another notch up, which I don't think is bad. I think it's really good. But I think what we're trying to do here is maybe a little bit different. And we're trying to forge ahead so that there's, I guess, a kind of a pressure on that end to get the rest of the marketplace going. And I think that in itself has some effect. But as far as shifting the systems and so on, we haven't really made any strides in that area.
Did you say that the technology and the improvements that you're developing through e-collection you're sharing with the rest of the industry? And if that's true, is the Gap also have that commitment, or is that a commitment just that us free have?
Well, we have to qualify that, it's a little bit like organic cotton farmers sharing information and passing it on, and to what degree they do that when the marketplace, is really hot right now. And it's one of those dichotomies again. It's really interesting, personally, to go through what you're idealistically, of course you want to share information, and we do. But at the same time, when to share that information so that you still protect your own market, and there's a fine balance there. And I have nightmares about it all the time, actually, and cold sweats and bad days and all kinds of stuff. So we do share information, and but I think, generally speaking, we wait for at least one season where we've run something like our organic wovens, for example. We wait for one season before that information goes off, but in the fashion industry, that's not a lot of time, not a lot of time at all. And so I think it's one of those things, again, which we're all struggling with. How do you balance these global concerns with maintaining the market lead? It's not an easy one, and we take it on a case-by-case basis.
I think an important distinction to make too is the cooperative effort in this area is far greater and far surpasses any other part of our businesses. So I think in that respect, everybody is very generous with information and helping hints, and that sort of try this instead of that. But like Linda says, you do have to try to protect your market, but the cooperation in this area far surpasses any other area in our business. You wouldn't have competitors sitting up here telling this in other parts.
No. And we often call each other up selectively.
Right.
Call each other up to exchange information and problems and so on.
I should say that all of these folks have been very cooperative with me, and they've just overextended themselves. And sometimes I've asked them to do stuff that I really hate to ask them to do. And they've come through every time, and I really want to applaud them and, keep working with them as long as we can. The other thing is, I don't have a question, I have an answer. It's lunchtime, and we should put an end to this, and so maybe we can take just a few minutes to wrap up or whatever you want to do. And if there are any other burning questions, we can take them, but the lunch is ready, and it's, thanks a lot.
Let's go eat. Thank you.